call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We will begin with our pledge, and I'm going to ask our student board member to lead our pledge today, Michelle Price.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, we're missing.
Well, Barbara's looking for parking.
Oh, okay. And I know Member Baum will not be here today, but he will be here tomorrow. So, and Jerry, will you call the roll, please?
Present.
Here.
She's here.
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 Robert McDonald,
Here.
Alice Perez,
Here.
Michelle Price,
Here.
Gary Reed,
Here.
Hannah Thomas.
Here.
Okay. And Jerry, do we have a quorum? Okay. Thank you. Again, welcome everybody. We just come from a very good, nice breakfast meeting with FACT this morning. That's why we're a little bit later than we normally would be today. For the President's report, I just have a couple things, but I think they are significant. One, I just wanted to thank Marlene Garcia and the staff of the Chancellor's office for an absolutely terrific job that they did at for our trip to Washington, D.C. It was extremely well put together. I think we had some really, really terrific meetings with members of Congress. We had a private meeting with Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis and her chief deputy. We had a very good meeting with the Undersecretary of Education, Martha Cantor. We divided into teams, saw many of our own members of Congress, as well as some of the leadership positions. So, Marlene, you just did a terrific job, and you and your staff are to be commended for sure. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that the U.S. Department of Education, or rather the White House, will be holding a community college summit in San Diego on April 15th. I have been working with the U.S. Department of Education and our local community college district, San Diego Community College District, which will be pretty much hosting the summit. There are 4 of them across the nation. They just did one in Philadelphia, and the West Coast one will be April 15th in September, in April 15th, and will focus on veterans. And Jill Biden, wife of our Vice President, will be there, possibly Admiral Mullen from the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well. So we're looking forward to participating in that. With that, I will turn it over to the Chancellor for the Chancellor's report.
Well, thank you very much. I might add just a little word on the summit. It is a Western summit, and so there will be representatives there from other states other than California. And unfortunately, there will be some limitation on the numbers that can attend in terms of participation. But it's exciting that the summit is being held. One of the regional summits is being held in San Diego. I have quite a number of things to report, and I have one that is a little bit of a surprise, and I want to particularly thank Marlene Garcia on this. some time ago, Marlene came to me and she said, why don't we invite the governor to one of our meetings? And I followed her advice and did that. And the surprise is that he is going to attend the meeting. And he will be here this morning at 10:15. Now, whether he arrives right at 10:15, I don't know. That most governors generally find their schedule very crowded.
No, but-
My guess is that he will talk to us about the budget and perhaps particularly about the community colleges. I frankly, the governor will set the nature of the agenda, and whether there'll be opportunities for questions or not, I really don't know, although I've noticed that this governor seems pretty open to that possibility. And so the Board of Governors perhaps will be able to answer some questions. As perhaps you know, Jerry Brown's first elected office was to the being on the Board of Trustees of the Los Angeles Community College District many, many years ago. And then he went from that to Secretary of State, and then from that to becoming the governor of the state the first time around. And of course, he's returned. So we look forward to welcoming him. And, you know, I assured him that we are, you know, we understand the difficulty of the budget, that it's not that we enjoy the cuts that are recommended, but we realize that along with all the others, that the community college will experience cuts. Now, of course, he's very much involved in trying to see that an election occurs in June, and I might say that that has to be decided this week according to the timetable, March 10th. And of course, there's some, you know, there's some debate as to whether or not there'll be a sufficient number of votes in order to get that budget on the ballot. And of course, if the budget's not on the ballot, the reality is that the community colleges and every other state agency will suffer, frankly, horrendous cuts, because Governor Brown has said that he wants it to be cuts and the extension of taxes. But if it's not the extension of taxes, then in order to balance the budget, the only other way to do is to sharpen the knife and make the cuts even worse. So stay tuned. I have appeared, as I wrote to the Board of Governors, I have appeared before both budget subcommittees. I made the case strongly against the census idea, which so far in the budget report, they have dropped that idea. I would say the legislature has not approved that idea. Secondly, I made the strong case that if we are experiencing a cut, that we should have a workload reduction. That is, that we cannot educate the same number of students with less money. And that also was included in, right now, the findings of the Budget Committee. So a lot of our staff has been working very hard on this. A lot of you perhaps have been meeting with legislators and making this point. And so we will just have to wait and see. I've also worked very hard on the issue of appointments. It appears that particularly the difficulty we've had with the appointment of both Peter McDougall and Henry Ramos, they were withdrawn, and right now the plan appears to be that sometime in April they will be once again brought up for confirmation, and we will hope that that the result will be favorable. This has been a very difficult situation. It was caught up in political maneuvering at the end of last year's budget, but now we have a new governor and a new House Rules Committee is what I'm trying to say, Senate Rules Committee. So they will have to go through the Rules Committee once again. And then, of course, there's also the reappointment of some of our board members as well. So we will continue to work on that as hard as we can. I wrote the Board of Governors about a lot of the meetings that I've been in. Subsequent to writing that letter, I will tell you that I've also appeared before the Little Hoover Commission on February 24th. They're talking about community colleges, and I discussed it at some length with them, and then they asked a lot of questions. I tried to clarify how the community colleges operate. They ask a lot of questions about governance, about how we're governed, and I pointed out the existence of the local board of trustees and some other items. And so I had a discussion with them that lasted a little over an hour, so it was rather thorough. And, you know, they will at some later date make some recommendations concerning that. I also appeared before the College Board Western Region in San Francisco on February 26th, and we had our second meeting with MALDEF concerning the prerequisite issue, which will be discussed today. We met with them on February 28th to explain in great detail why the recommendation of the Academic Senate is what it is, and also about the kind of amendments that the Academic Senate proposal has taken in order to have safeguards concerning the prerequisites. I met with a group from Riverside in the Capitol on the 2nd of March, and then last Friday I spoke to a leadership group at the College of the Canyon. And we will have the Student Success Task Force will be meeting on Tuesday evening of this week and Wednesday, all day Wednesday. It's our third meeting of the task force. I've had some questions raised about the articles that have appeared in the Los Angeles Times concerning the Los Angeles Community College construction. As you know, these articles, I think there have been maybe 5 articles, and they have been quite critical of the construction program of the Los Angeles Community College District. I was prepared to answer questions if the Los Angeles Times called me. I'm not in the habit of volunteering myself to newspaper reporters if they don't call. And so far, I've not received a call. But let me try to answer any questions you might have about that. The question naturally might be, well, what oversight does the Chancellor's office have of local construction? And I want to clarify that very clearly. Unlike either CSU or UC, we are a very decentralized system. Each particular community college answers primarily to the local board of trustees. We do have regulations, and our regulations concerning construction are as follows. We do furnish supplement to local bonds if the community college district meets certain requirements. And in this case, we have provided about 5% of the funds that were used in the that are being used in the Los Angeles Community College District construction. Now, we don't pick vendors, we don't pick contractors. If people wanted us to get into that business, we would have to probably double the staff of the Chancellor's office. What we do, and Fred Harris is here, and Fred is ideal in terms of answering these questions. We simply indicate what the scope of, we tell them what the scope of the money that we give and the budget. And if there's any change in the budget or the scope, they have to come back to the Chancellor's office. We give no augmentation. When there's an overrun, that has to be borne by the local district. We let them know that whatever money we allocate as a result of the rules, then they in turn, if they overrun, that has to be borne by the local district. Of course, by far the vast majority of these funds that were provided to the Los Angeles Community College District was by local vote. I believe the total is somewhere between $5.5 and $6 billion. Now, I know I've had a conversation with the Chancellor of the Los Angeles Community College District, and I know they've made considerable changes to make sure that the problems that arose are corrected. They have appointed an inspector general. They have in turn, if you recall, there was some possibility of a conflict of interest, and a particular individual had to resign as a result of that. I don't know all the details about what went wrong, what went right. And by the way, there were a lot of things that went right. There were a lot of buildings that were built that did not have problems, but obviously some of these had problems. Perhaps there was some mismanagement. All I can say is that the present Chancellor, and I have a great deal of sympathy for Chancellor LaVista, because the reality is that he has only been in office 6 months. And so all of the questionable things that are brought up in the Los Angeles Times article were not done during the time he was chancellor. But nevertheless, he's the one that has had to answer the questions. And he has responded by saying, you know, we've corrected certain things. And by the way, the Department of State Architects does oversee certain things in buildings. They oversee the seismic, they oversee fire and safety, and they oversee to make sure that ADA, that is the Disabilities Act, is fulfilled. They don't oversee the general construction. They don't second guess in terms of who is the vendor or the contractor, but they make sure that a local community college district meets the requirements, the seismic requirements as the Field Act, the fire and safety requirements, and also the requirements involving the American Disabilities Act. Now, that's a little bit of the detail that I thought I'd give to you at this time. But Fred, you might want to add something to that because you've been closely connected with our building program in general. And of course, you know something about the Los Angeles Community College District.
Yes, I do. Good morning, Board and Chancellor. Thank you very much. Chancellor Scott, you did an awesome job in terms of covering, I think, all of the points. I just want to reiterate that 5 to 10% in that ballpark is the amount of funds that the state has provided for. I think there's probably 88 buildings that are in process or been constructed based on the new bond for LACCD. For the state funds, when it's usually it's in part because the district is putting forth money. The money is the budget and the scope of the project is established through the legislative process and is adhered to by the Public Works Board in each step of the way. And we have a policy of no augmentation. So if they have those cost overruns that have been highlighted in the article, that is a local affair relative to the plan check and also the construction inspection in those 3 areas of seismic, fire and life safety, and ADA access. That is the under the responsibility of the Division of State Architect. And I just would want to reiterate that now that the dust is settled after 6 articles, it would be interesting to see if the overall context of all of the projects that have been completed at LACCD and are in process, that story gets told.
I have a question or two, but I want to ask if other board members have any comments or questions first. Member Baca?
You know, I've read the articles, and they named a number of projects there, and it appears that they were all Prop 39 projects, but were any that you could see state-funded discussed?
LA Valley project had state funds in it, the Health and Science Building, and again, the scope was adhered to, the fit and finish of the building, as I've discussed with the district, the issue of leaking windows, fenestration, things not working. There was a dissatisfaction by the vendor that the district chose, and they went to another vendor to complete that particular part of the project. But those are areas that we do not involve ourselves in. The vendors are a decision made by the local district.
Other members? Fred, just for clarification on all these projects, and I guess particularly the ones where there's state funding, does the Chancellor's office formally approve the plans?
Yes,
for the building?
We review the plans initially during the working drawing phase. Also, and also for all state projects, districts front the local funds, and then they seek reimbursement, and they submit reimbursement claims for the project. I review all those claims and sign them. Sign their approval before they get paid. Also, the district is being subjected to a state controller's audit of their local bond program right now. And just as the normal course of affairs based on the language in Prop 1D, we have our friends from the Department of Finance audit visiting us between now and June, reviewing all of the state bond reviews. So our hope is that those different layers will be able to both confirm, if not review, the accountability for all the projects.
And then just to follow up on that, when there is a budget change on a project, even though we're not supplying any of the dollars, do we approve or disapprove those budget change matters, and how is that handled?
On change orders to the project, they are brought to our attention by the district, and we periodically check in. But with limited staff, we periodically check in. But on a change order, if it constitutes what's called a scope change, and that it's somewhat of a gray area of what that means. So basically, we ask the district for any major change order to contact us, because if there is any variance of scope, because it is for those state-funded projects,
Right.
We are very much interested in that, because again, the legislatively authorized budget and scope is what needs to be adhered to throughout the project, unless it seeks a change order through the Public Works Board process.
So, but the answer is, do we approve or disapprove formally, or do we just review?
We just review.
Okay. Okay, very good. And- go- Chancellor.
Let me just point out, and as someone who was a former president, and I recall very well the building of certain buildings at Pasadena City College, for which we received mostly state funding. Some of them were locally funded. That was before the bonds were much more easily passed. That was when it took a 2/3 vote, so most of it was state funding. But we, of course, chose the contractor. We saw to it that the contractor followed exactly what they promised that they would do. We hired someone there at Pasadena City College who was our person on the spot, not paid by the contractor, but paid by the college, to make sure that the architectural plans were followed, and when they were not followed, then we didn't pay. It was pretty simple. And so, but we have to leave this, whatever, as I said, whatever mistakes might have been made, it would be impossible for us as a Chancellor's office to oversee all the buildings that are going on in every community college district. There are 72 community college districts, and in this case, there are 88 buildings. And so that we simply, we make sure that the plans are approved. We make sure that it meets the overall state plan, but then the money is turned over to the local district, and ultimately, the local board of trustees is responsible. Most of those boards, and I think this was true of the LA Community College District, have what they call an oversight committee. And that oversight committee is called upon to make sure, for instance, we had a local bond after I left Pasadena City College, and they had an oversight committee to make sure that the committee was generally made up of citizens of the community. And then, of course, as I said, normally there's a hire of someone at the local campus who in turn will be overseeing that building. So, as I said, I've been in contact with Chancellor Vista, and there is an audit that's going on right now under the Controller's office, and whether or not there will be some additional requirements or legislation. However, I will say very clearly that if we're called upon to exercise a great deal more oversight, we will ask for more money, because given the fact that we have a staff of only 145 people, and Fred does a superb job in this, but there's no way that we as a Chancellor's office could be involved in overseeing every building project that's going on in the state of California. I regret whatever mistakes were made, and I'm not here to excuse or to in any way exonerate. That's not my job. But I would simply say that's, since some of you had asked about that, I want to clarify and make it very clear what our responsibility is, and what the responsibility is in turn of the local districts.
And I'd share with you that now that LACCD has an inspector general that reports directly to the chancellor since last November, that's the only district I'm aware of that has that extra degree of accountability.
Okay. Any other board member questions or comments? Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Chancellor. Okay, let's move to our approval of minutes. Any move approval by Member Barrera, seconded by Member Azumi.
Mr. President.
Vice Chancellor Bruckman?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the next group of items are on a consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
So if the board would like to take those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items all at once, they can do so, or if any member of the board would like to remove one or more items from that consent agenda, that would be appropriate too.
Would any member like to pull an item from consent for
I do want to.
discussion? Member Perez, which item would you like to pull?
Is the EEO part of that? The equal
Yes.
opportunity? I'd like to pull that from that and have discussion, please.
Okay, any other members wishing to pull items? Okay, no, it's not.
So then the board can vote on everything except that.
Right, so, Member Barreras, do you want to amend your motion? Okay, move approval of everything except item number
Item 1.3.
1.3. Moved by, seconded by Member Izumi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Vice President Perez?
I did have a couple of questions on the EEO, and some of it just had to do with me having a good understanding of some of the recommendations that are being made. And part of it is just clarification. So it seems to me that the gist of the recommendation is that the locals are responsible for doing their annual validation. That validation is no longer the responsibility of the Chancellor's office. And part of the concern that I had with that was that if we need to roll up numbers at a statewide level and everyone's not conforming to the same process to track those numbers, how do we roll that? How do we get those numbers then, if nobody's conforming to the same methodology?
Well, I don't know exactly what section of the regulation you're referring to. This is a significant change to our policies and regulations, and it was presented for first reading last time, and we had a number of people here at that time who were involved in the drafting of it. I was also involved, but I just wanted to let you know that I think there's not the same representation in the audience here today to address these issues. But is there a particular provision that you're referring to?
What I was looking at was in Section 5 and also in Section 6, where we're talking about the data gathering. And I also had some questions, like on 7, to the extent data regarding potential job applications is provided by the state chancellor, how can you provide data if there's no consistency in data being collected? How is the chancellor going to provide that data? How is the state office going to do that? And then the other thing is when you look on the following page, and it talks about B, for purposes of data collection and report requires. Again, is there going to be an annual report from the chancellor that's rolling up this data for review? Because this is a very important thing to be able to track whether or not there's inconsistencies. And the other thing is, it seems like the approach is, previously it was a very proactive approach. Now we're going to a very reactive approach. Because now the approach is that if somebody raises concern, if somebody brings forward some thoughts, then we're going to look at it. Where before it was a more proactive approach because people were mandated to track this on an annualized basis.
Yeah,
No?
the approach has changed somewhat, and this was largely at the request and direction of the local districts. The human resources officers at the districts had a task force and developed these regulations over a period of a year and a half, and they were vetted widely throughout the state. And I think the intent was for there to be somewhat less Chancellor's office regulation in this area and to allow more local supervision. There was a concern about, in some respects, and I think it's reflected in the report, a concern with the potential impact of Proposition 209 at the local districts, that if searches were halted for lack of diversity, that could have adverse impacts for the local districts in terms of litigation. So the regulations were modified to provide some greater flexibility there for the districts. The districts are still required to track and keep records and review their diversity achievements on an ongoing basis. That has not changed.
Well, the way that they're doing it has changed.
The way they are doing it has changed.
And the other thing is that if we were, just very similar to some dialogue we've been having since last year, where we've been asking for data, we have not been able to get data because there's not a consistent method of capturing that data because each local is doing it in their own way. So with something as critical as this, again, if the Chancellor's office is not saying, we'd like to have certain categories of data tracked, they can still track additional or less if they choose, but at a minimum, certain things should be tracked. If we try to roll up this data statewide, we will not be able to do that. At least that's the way I'm interpreting this. So part of my question is to please provide clarity around that. If we wanted to get a statewide roll-up, would that be possible with the proposal as it is written today?
A statewide roll-up in terms of the
data.
of the diversity of our employees?
If there's inconsistency in certain campuses over other campuses, I mean, is there going to be a possibility to roll that data up statewide to see that?
Yeah, I think that would still be possible. I think the categories of diversity are not changing. It may be that the districts are maintaining their records in a slightly different way, but they are all required to maintain the same categories of diversity and to maintain the same data. One thing that's changed specifically is the availability data is no longer being provided by the State Chancellor's Office because we were frankly unable to develop that data. The acquisition of that data was impossible for a variety of reasons. We attempted that. We hired UCLA to develop availability data, and in order, it was not feasible. So that piece of the regulations has been removed, and it's now up to the local districts through their own processes to achieve diversity as they see fit. And these regulations were conceived by the human resources officers as sort of a step forward, an advance in how to achieve this goal. But if the Board of Governors is uncomfortable with the proposal, with the regulations, the board is certainly free to ask more questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the human resources professionals here in the room today. I don't think, because we weren't anticipating, since there were no questions at the first reading. We thought we could put it on the consent agenda and move forward this time.
And by the way, I might point out that Linda Malkolowski is in Connecticut because of the serious illness of her mother. And it's in her department. And as Steve pointed out, we had this first reading before, and I don't know what the board wants to do about this. That's up to you. But I think the questions could be answered fairly clearly. I think certainly Vice Chancellor Bruckman has pointed out some of the thinking on it, but as I said before, we didn't have a thorough discussion of it the time before, and unfortunately, Vice Chancellor Malkolowski can't be here today.
My primary concern is that the Chancellor's office has the ability to roll up the data statewide, and that there is some consistency in tracking across the board, that if it was asked to have a report, that we would be able to have that report, and we would not be in the situation that we've been in previously in many occasions where it's being tracked differently on the local level, and when we try to roll that information up, we're unable to roll the information up.
Yeah.
That's my primary
Do
concern.
you mean that we've been unable to give you information on the diversity of the staff?
No, I'm not talking about that specifically, Jack. In
Well,
other-
I mean, I'm curious what it is that...
It's not diversity of staff.
What a failure of providing data was. Because I know that we have a complete data on the diversity of the staff, whether it has to do with gender, whether it has to do with ethnicity, and age and so forth. But you keep referring to the fact that you had sought data and wasn't able to get it. What was the data you sought that you couldn't get?
It was data regarding prerequisites. Those are the discussions we've been having over a period of time, is about trying to capture data on the prerequisites.
Well, we'll be
and
discussing
student
that
success.
under the prerequisites.
I understand that. That's why I didn't want to bring it up now. And so my main concern, though, is just that we have the ability to capture data at a statewide level and to be able to report out if we need to. And if you're saying...
I feel comfortable that we can, that each college is maintaining important and relevant data relating to the hiring, who they're hiring. They have detailed records of who they've hired and the processes they've gone through to to carry out their hiring processes. Every college, every district can respond. How many of their faculty, how many of their classified are of a different, various ethnic groups and so on. So I don't believe that particular ability is jeopardized by these changes.
That was my primary concern.
Member Barreras?
I just want to make a comment that at State Center, typically on a yearly basis, we do request data, and they give us a spreadsheet where we have all of our faculty, female, by gender, demographics, and ethnicity, so that because we try to review that on a yearly basis to make sure we're up to par in terms of meeting our numbers and looking at our student population. So we do get that. Just wanted to make that.
And I believe every district does that. And generally, it's most relevant at the local level because that's where the hiring occurs. So we don't necessarily aggregate it on an ongoing basis, but that could be done.
Member McDonald?
Can we add the piece, the element that Board Member Perez wants to have in this? Can we add that, the roll-up of the data? Can we add this to the regulation?
What specifically would you like to add? That there be capacity to?
Well, the comments that she's making, can we add that to it so we can move on to vote or add that little piece, because that seems to be something we need to have as far as. Do you understand what I'm asking? I mean, can we add that to the regulation now?
Well,
I think we'd have to refer it back, would we not, Steve?
Yes.
And bring it.
yeah, and
bring it
we
back.
would have to refer it back to make a change to the regulation at this time. I'm not certain that that's necessary, but if the board would prefer that, then that certainly can be done. But I believe the concern that has been raised is addressed as Board Member Barreras mentioned that at her district, and I believe the same is true at other districts. I think Jeff Bounds, he was here, would say the same.
Let me ask Vice President Perez if she feels comfortable with that.
I feel comfortable, Steve, as long as you feel confident we can get the information and that the information is being provided, that if we needed to roll it up statewide, we can actually do that. So based on the dialogue here, and the minutes will reflect that is a possibility that we can do that.
Member Baca?
Yeah, in Mount Sac, we don't have any problem with putting that kind of information together, so I'm assuming that every other district is similar.
Member McDonald?
And then I'll move the motion to in
I
favor.
second it.
To approve, seconded by Member Haley.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That takes care of item 1.3. We have next item 2.1, our discussion on prerequisites. But since that's likely to take a lot of discussion, there's a lot of interest in that, and we do have Governor Brown coming in about 10 minutes or so. We think, I'd hope to be okay with the board if we move to another item. I think we ought to have a good set of time that's uninterrupted for that issue. So I would ask that maybe we could take item 2.4 next. That's formally adopting our goals for 2011 at our retreat and meeting in January. The board came up with 3 goals that we were going to focus on, not exclusively 3, but 3 major goals, and I think all of us thought it very important that we bring that forward at a regularly scheduled board meeting to adopt those goals, communicate that to the public and all of our colleges statewide. And so those goals are that we would continue to work with the State Board of Education on areas in common, specifically around the areas of basic skills and concurrent enrollment. Second, we would continue on the great work of our Veterans Committee, and that we would engage ourselves to the full extent possible in advocacy over the coming year. Any discussion on those goals? Member Malumed.
I couldn't help but notice that the advocacy and building relationships excluded the committee chairs in what's in the minutes, and I wondered if it would be okay to put that back in.
Which committee chairs?
It said advocacy and building relationships with the new administration
Right.
and committee chairs.
And the Senate and Assembly
And
committee
in
chairs?
our paper today, it just excluded and committee chairs, so I
Yeah.
was hoping it'd be okay to put that back in.
I think that sounds like an excellent idea
you.
myself. Any comment on that? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve those goals. Member Azumi?
I so move that we approve those goals.
Second by Vice President Perez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Maybe we could maybe start the discussion. Member Price, are you talking about item 2.3
I was
at
going to
all?
have Sonia Ortiz from the Chancellor's office bring that up, start conversation on that.
Okay, Ms. Ortiz, are you prepared to begin that? Please be advised, we may be interrupted at any moment, but if you could start that, I'd sure appreciate it.
Good morning, President Himmelstein, Chancellor Scott, and members of the board. Vice Chancellor Linda Michalowski is currently out of state and has asked me to present the proposed organizational model for the board's Student Affairs Committee that is currently under consideration. In response to concerns raised in January regarding the Student Senate for California Community Colleges and the conflict that has become more apparent over the past fiscal year, the board requested that we develop a proposal for the Student Affairs Committee to strengthen the connection between the board and the Student Senate. As background, Section 5002 of Title V specifies the board's relationship to the Student Senate. It's in this section that the board recognizes the Student Senate as the representative body for California community college students' participation in shared governance. Further details on the board or the Chancellor's office role or the requirements for the Student Senate's continued recognition in the shared governance role are not specified in regulation or statute. Just give me the signal if I need to stop. The proposed Student Affairs Committee would serve to strengthen the link between the board and the Student Senate. The proposal included in your agenda packets contains 5 key elements: the purpose, the goals, the committee composition, the frequency of meetings, and the process for communicating significant issues of concern and concerns. The purpose is to provide an ongoing and regular communication mechanism to communicate the interests and the concerns of community college students to the board in coordination with the Chancellor's Office and the California Community College Student Affairs Association, also known as CSAW. The goals include providing an opportunity to address the student concerns and issues as they arise that could result in recommendations to the board, the Student Senate Council, or to the general student body through the spring and fall General Assemblies. The proposed composition of the committee would include 2 members of the board, including the student representative, the vice president and president of the Student Senate, and representative from CSAW and representative from the Chancellor's office. As an aside, Carlos Maldonado, president of the California Community College Student Affairs Association, wanted me to share with you that although he regrets not being able to attend today's board meeting, that CSAW is supportive of the proposal and any effort to strengthen the foundation of the Student Senate. The proposal would have the committee meet 6 times per year and also identifies a process for communicating meeting outcomes and recommendations by the committee members to their respective organizations. So the board representatives would loop back and discuss recommendations back to the board and students back to the Student Senate. Along with the other measures that we are putting into place to resolve the conflict on the Student Senate and support the development of the student leadership, we believe that the Student Affairs Committee would also play an important role. Our office recommends approval of the proposed Student Affairs Committee. Thank you.
Member McDonald.
I move for approval.
Second.
Do we have public comment?
Okay.
Mark Venezuela from the Student Senate.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to come up and say that we are in support of this. I know Sonia and Linda have done a fantastic job fostering communication between the Chancellor's office and the Student Senate. They're always there when we need them. And I think this item is really going to lay out the groundwork and formalize some of the processes that we already do. And so I think this is going to be good for the students. I think this is going to be good for the board. And I think it's going to allow us to continue working together in an effective manner to protect our system. So we're in support of this. Thank you.
Any comments from board members? Thank you, Mark. I would like to commend Member Price for her work on this and bringing this forward to the board. I think it's a very, very good step. I do think it brings us closer to the needs of the students, so I commend her for her leadership on this. I would entertain a motion to approve. Oh, I'm sorry.
We already did it.
Member McDonald. Who is the second? Member Davis-Lyman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion.
Am I too far down here? I mean,
Yeah.
No, it just got sidetracked. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, so he's good. Okay. Let me see. Improvising here. These other, huh? Yeah. Paul Lanning, are you in the audience? I saw him earlier. Maybe we could. Yeah, could you?
Just down the hall there, Jerry.
Member Azumi?
And Jerry says that Paul has a PowerPoint, so that if he's going to give his presentation, it would...
Okay, that's not going to work.
Dan will be back in a minute. He just went to get his, so he'll be.
Okay, well, we're just going to talk amongst ourselves for a moment till Dan can come back. Paul, thanks for coming over. No. Actually,
I've never had so many cameras.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do the board member reports would be a possibility, but it's up to the board if they want to do that.
I tell you what, why don't we wait just a couple minutes for Dan to come back, and we'll start talking about the state budget. So be back with you in 1 or 2 minutes here. Okay, at this point, we will take item 3.2, and Dan, is it Vice Chancellor now?
Yes.
Yes, our new Vice Chancellor, Dan Troy.
Yeah, let me say something about Dan Troy. We are very pleased that Dan Troy is our new Vice Chancellor for Fiscal Policy. As you recall, when Morgan Lynn left as our Executive Vice Chancellor of Programs, we then, in turn, elevated Eric Skinner to become the Executive Vice Chancellor for Programs, and that left a vacancy for Vice Chancellor for Fiscal Policy. For several months, Eric Skinner did the admirable job of doing 2 jobs at the same time, but we were able to find an excellent replacement in Dan Troy, who had served very ably in the legislature as a consultant for the Committee on Appropriations, so his knowledge of the budget, of course, was extremely good, and so Dan has really hit the ground running. I've been terribly impressed by how quickly he's grasped the intricacies of the budget, and so he'll give you a budget update at this time as we await the governor's arrival.
Thank you, Chancellor Scott, members of the board. We have a handout being passed around at the moment, and I have a distinct feeling that this is going to be trumped in a moment by the governor's news, but I'll try to set the stage for him if that helps. As you know, the governor in January released his budget proposal, which identified a $25.4 billion gap over a 2-year period. That figure grew a bit when the governor rejected the legislature's initially approved building sale and leaseback plan. Between that and a need for an increased reserve, the legislature was tasked with the unenviable job of solving a $27.7 billion gap. Last week, the conference committee wrapped up its take on the governor's budget, trying to filling that gap in. The governor had proposed a very balanced plan in our view, reducing expenditures by $12.5 billion, enhancing revenues primarily through extension of existing temporary taxes for 5 years for a total of about $12 billion. And the legislature also met the $27 billion gap by borrowing about $3.2 billion from various special funds. Detailed in the handout are the major areas of program reductions. Below that are the revenue enhancements, much of which, as I mentioned, will be subject to a ballot, hopefully to come in June of this year. That is the big question before us right now. Specifically for the community colleges, the conference approved the level of community college reductions proposed by the governor. The system will...
Excuse me, Vice Chancellor, could you speak up a little bit? Having a little trouble. Or and Jerry, can we turn up the volume a little bit? Or can't hear?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The system will absorb about a $400 million base reduction, and student fees will be raised from $26 to $36 per unit. That increase in fees provides an additional $110 million in estimated new fee revenues. While the governor had initially proposed, as Chancellor Scott mentioned earlier this morning, to have us allocate that reduction through a change in the census accounting method, we did work hard with the legislature to convince them that that was a bad idea that had many unintended consequences, and they agreed with us. So we will be taking, therefore, that reduction as an overall workload reduction, with the new fee revenues mitigating the impact somewhat for our colleges. So the net impact is about $290 million in a base workload reduction. That's about a 4.9% cut. Now, of course, the big question is that we're not quite done. This is what I call phase one of the budget. We've got the cuts in place by and large. What we need now is some to get that other side of the budget. We need to get the revenues extensions on the ballot and approved in June. That is what's being debated right now by the governor and members of the Big Five. They're looking for at least 2 Republican members from each house to go along with extending those, for putting those taxes on the ballot. And without that, certainly our budget situation is going to look a lot more dire if we don't get there. With that in mind, you'll note on the bottom of page 2, I've highlighted some of the options that the LAO put on the table in what we call their doomsday scenario. Senator Leno, who's the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, asked the LAO to detail some options for how the legislature would deal with the budget if they had to do an all-cuts budget. And the options aren't pretty. Specifically for community colleges, the LAO outlined $685 million in additional reductions. So these are cuts beyond the $400 million cut that we were already taking in the governor's proposal. We calculate that if that were to take place, we would lose about 400,000 funded FTES over a 1-year period. So this is obviously a pretty significant issue for us, and we're hopeful that those tax extensions will make the ballot and be approved. The LAOs, some of their specific proposals would change a lot of enrollment priorities, such as perhaps eliminating state subsidies for students who have already completed 90 units of instruction, reduce funding for credit basic skills courses to the level provided for non-credit basic skills courses. So there's a lot of controversial proposals that they've put forward. Of course, that doesn't mean that this is what the legislature or the governor would agree to do if we got to that point. But these are the kinds of things that people will be talking about. So we will work hard to if the need for reductions arise, we'll work hard to make sure that the cuts are more proportionate within the Prop 98 world, such that we're not taking a larger, more than our fair share of the hit. And we will work very hard to ensure, to shield the system from damaging policy options as well, just as we did with the census proposal. And otherwise, we're waiting for the taxes.
Questions from board members? I have one. When the, and I guess I should know this, having served up here, but when the LAO comes out with these these recommendations, then have they consulted at all with our system, or is it I think I remember them coming over to see me in the Secretary of Education's office a couple times, but just curious.
Well, I think that depends on the specific option. Typically, the numbers they come up with, they've contacted our office in order to get the data to make their recommendations. But that doesn't. They're a independent entity, and they'll make their own call on what to propose. I do know Mr. Steenhausen, who is primarily in charge of the LAO community college budget. Is very knowledgeable of the system, and he does meet with a lot of stakeholders and try to get their input. Obviously, we would oppose many of these options that he's put on the table, certainly if they were intended to be implemented on July 1.
Chancellor.
2 years ago, if you'll remember, the LAO recommended that physical education be funded at the non-credit level and that fees be increased to $60 a unit. Obviously, we did not agree with either one of those proposals, and fortunately, neither of those proposals were adopted. So the LAO proposes, and some of these proposals I think have merit, others do not. The point that I think the LAO has made is that we are going to be in a horrendous difficulty if we have to do all this by cuts. And actually, a request was made of the LAO to suggest what would happen if the tax extensions, either number one, are not on the ballot, or number two, do not pass. And that's what the LAO has done. They're not saying that's what they want to see happen. In fact, the LAO is more in line with the governor's recommendations on cuts and tax extensions. But that's so, as I think Dan has well pointed out, we will simply be in a position if this unfortunate circumstances occur, we will, there's no way that we can avoid cuts. We will minimize them as much as we can, and we will have a hand in recommending the ones that we believe have merit and the ones that do not. And, obviously we're not excited about proposing what we're going to do in that case. But that is, the legislative analyst is paid attention to, but the legislative analyst is very frequently, their recommendations are not followed by the legislature. Right. And and I would say they tend to sort of come out with the, they're willing to come out with the more controversial kinds of recommendations, and as I say, sometime they're adopted and sometime not.
Yeah, and it should clarify that, as the Chancellor hinted at, these are not necessarily what the LAO wants to happen. They prefer a balanced approach to the budget. So, in fact, in their, they made that very clear in the letter that they think that we need revenues as well as cuts. We seem to have got the cuts already.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan.
This is our president of the Board of Governors.
Nice to see you. Okay, good.
They've already gone.
Looks like you got quite a crowd here.
Yes, we do.
You tend to attract a crowd.
No, I think it's probably really going.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me.
Chancellor?
Well,
You wanna just
I
set
don't
the
think
context-
I...
You want to set the context of what you're talking about, what you're concerned,
Okay,
and where you are in
all right.
in this, just kind of lay it out so we have a framework, and then I'd like to add
Okay.
my own thoughts.
Well, we are extremely pleased that you've come to be here with us. I pointed out to this audience that you had been introduced to the community colleges very early in your career, since you served as on the board of the Los Angeles Community College District prior to becoming Secretary of State. And we have just given a budget report. I think most of us are aware of the very difficult situation that you're placed in. And I will say to your face what I've said privately. I think you've been very candid with the state of California. You've said no more smoke and mirrors. We're going to face up to the reality of this huge budget deficit that we have. And as you promised in your campaign, you said that you wanted to go to a vote of the people if there was an extension of taxes, and you felt that the best way to solve the problem is through both cuts and taxes. And we in the community colleges serve 2.75 million students. We're doing our very best. Clearly, we've had to reduce the number of courses that we offer, not because we choose to, but because we recognize that the resources are limited. And we have emphasized the three things that we're trying to emphasize now are transfer courses, basic skill courses, and career technical courses. And I have appeared before both of the budget subcommittees and indicated a little bit of our thinking on these subjects. We recognize, as I said, no one can exult in having fees increased or not taking cuts, but we understand that along with the other state agencies and all the other things, and that the cuts are going to be painful wherever they are. So, Governor Brown, we are thrilled that you've come our way to share with us your thoughts on the community college, and perhaps also to share with us a little bit about the state of the budget in general, and how we as community colleges, I'll take it one step further, if indeed the tax extension gets on the ballot, how we might be helpful in seeing that that's passed.
Well, thank you, and I do have I want you to elaborate a little more on those second and third. I understood the first, that it's very important to ensure that when a student takes a course at community colleges, that course will be counted when and if he or she wants to go to state college or the university. Are we there yet? Is that done, or is that?
Let me tell you what did happen last year, Governor.
Because remember, they've been working on that for how many years?
Ever since I was in the community
college.
college.
So I want to know, can we say it's either done or it'll be done by the end of this year?
It was done in legislation, and we right now are implementing it in committees that are meeting. A committee that is an implementation committee between the California State University and community colleges. Here's exactly what Senate Bill 1440, which was heavily lobbied by both myself and Chancellor Reed. It simply said that every community college will offer a transfer associate degree of no more than 60 units. Then in turn, that at California State University, that will be accepted and they will have junior standings. 60 units will be accepted. They in turn have agreed that they will require no more than an additional 60 units. We think that with the same amount of money, we can educate 55,000 more community college students and 15,000 more California State University. We are looking at the fact that we believe that far too many students have transferred to California State University and ended up that certain credits didn't count at this one or did at that one.
Are they going to count that? Can we be confident of that?
Well, it's in legislation.
I know, but is it done, or are we still working?
We're working on the exact details. The overall thing, we're looking at each discipline. And I have in the audience here Jane Patton, who is the Academic Senate President, and she's working very closely with the Academic Senate President of California State University.
So you feel they're right now it works?
Right now, it's working, and furthermore, if it doesn't work,
You'll call me.
I'll give you a call.
But now,
You
what
count
about-
on that.
What about UC? Does this transfer?
Well, we have a little constitutional problem there.
No, but they could be collaborative if they wanted to.
There is a bill that was passed that said they should collaborate on this, and my judgment is that once those students start going to California State University with greater ease, suddenly the University
Well,
of
do you think we
California.
need to bring the regents in on this to get?
I've talked to Russ Gould, and he's 100% behind it.
But if you want me to get them to act, I mean, we all have talk and process, but I want to say, let's just get it done.
I'd love
So
for
we
you-
should have a meeting of some
That's
key
right.
regents and yourself?
That's right.
Maybe that would help?
That would help.
Why don't we do that?
Good enough.
So we'll do it. We'll do
All
it.
right, good.
What are the other two? You had two other things. Skill, you had besides
I talked
transfer,
about,
what are the other two?
Career technical education, vocational education. You know, we offer 175 different programs of
And
career.
then what was the third?
The third was basic skills, which is another word for remedial education.
And English is the second language?
That's part of it.
Basic skills. Now, where does apprenticeship fit into this?
It
The
fits in
second
a
and third.
career technical education. Apprenticeship, or like, for instance, if you're going to become an electrician,
Yeah.
we
We
work
offer
with the
those.
unions. Yes,
Those
we
are
do.
special courses, right?
Those are special courses, and they're expensive, but we're doing the best we can to offer as many
They
as
are
we can.
expensive?
Oh, yeah, because you have more equipment.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble with vocational ed, that it does require more equipment.
Yeah, that's right.
Than a,
And I'm encouraging the colleges to go out to the business world and get as much equipment as they can donated free.
well, let me just respond and tell you that we are facing a very serious challenge in the budget. So far, we have the committees that have put forward a budget, but we lack Republican votes to put this matter before the people. And when I say this matter before the people, I mean not just taxes, but I also mean cuts. I believe that in our society and in California at this point in history, that the people should weigh in on whether they would like to extend taxes that they're already paying, or do they want to have an all-cuts budget wherein we double the cuts to the community colleges and all the other areas of state government. I think this would have such a profound impact on schools and colleges and the health and the public safety that I don't think the legislature of itself ought to make this decision at this point in history. I believe we have to check in and seek guidance and validation from the people of California. So this is not just a campaign pledge. This is a commitment to reinvigorate our democratic process. We know politicians are not the most favored people in our society. And if you look to the favorability of the legislature, it lacks something. It's not at 100%. In fact, it's closer in the opposite direction. And therefore, profound disruption and changes to our schools, our colleges, our public safety, our basic safety net. That's something that will be very good, very important, and I think vital to get the people of California to offer their judgment. We are a democratic society. In our own Constitution, it says the legislative power rests with the people themselves. Now, in the ordinary course, the legislature and the governor can handle garden variety decisions. This is not a garden variety decision. This is a game changer. This is a matter of how California will look over the next 10 years. And therefore, a check-in with the voters is very important. That's why I want the electorate to decide. Now, some of the people acting under the influence of Washington lobbyists and others say that to let the people decide is to determine the people's ultimate decision. That is false. What I'm asking people is not to vote for cuts or taxes, but to let the people decide what it is they want. What is the vision of California? And if we can get the support of the people, because I myself will advocate for the tax extensions, building on the cuts, which you here all know are already painful and not so productive in many respects. But they're needed because that's the only money that we have available. But I have to say to my Republican colleagues who I'm talking to, I'm asking you not to tax anybody. I'm asking you to let the people of California decide, do they wish to extend these existing taxes, or do they wish to double the cuts that I've already proposed? That's the simple proposition, and we're not there yet. And some people would say, look, instead of just letting the people decide that, why don't we take all the political ideas over the last 10 years on pensions, on schools, on the way we budget, on civil service, on tort reform. Why don't we take all these battles of the last 10 years, and why don't we renew them in the next week? And after we renew them, then put that on the ballot as well. And my response is, I will consider all these different suggestions, but don't try to load down what is a relatively simple choice, to either extend or to double the cuts. That's what it is. And we're not there yet. This is about as difficult and important decision that I've seen. And I've been here before, and I've been looking at it for over 30 years. And this is important, and I just have to appeal. If you know any Republican, tell him that he or she should vote to give the people a voice. And if those Republicans would like to debate me, and they take the anti-tax side, I will join with them, and I hope some of you will join with me, and we'll have a great debate. But let the people decide, instead of 120 people in Sacramento, or as this case may be, it's 4 people. 2 Republicans in the Senate, 2 Republicans in the Assembly. And we're asking them. And I think they'd like to do it, but they are being threatened with defeat, with career-ending attacks that will be made from lobbyists in Washington, various interest groups right here in California. So they need help, and they need some protection. And I'm hopeful at the end of the day that we will have this great debate and great election for this June, and that Californians will vote to invest in your system of schools and the other aspects of the state budget. And that's what I'm looking forward to. So there we are.
All right.
So you thought you were in trouble before, but we still have some perils to avoid as we go forward.
The president of the board would like to maybe ask a question, and ask if any of the Board of Governors have questions. Are you willing to entertain questions?
Yes. Vice President Perez.
First of all, Governor, thank you for coming to visit us today. It really means a lot to us that you took the time to come and talk with us personally. The other thing is, on a personal level, I truly appreciate your frankness and your openness to saying, I have a plan. If you don't like it, bring some other options along. One question I do have, though, as far as putting the items on the ballot, is it going to be packaged, either yes or no, or are you going to break them out to where people can have the option to vote as far as schools, health care, et cetera? Is it going to be one big lump, or is it going to be broken?
We're looking for one vote, which will be a vote to extend the taxes, to apply the money locally to schools, public safety, and that to me, I think that's very appropriate. So the money, this is a plan that has deep cuts, it has tax extensions, and it has realignment. And the realignment is to move government closer to the people, giving counties and school districts more money and more authority to make decisions that have been gradually sucked up to Sacramento, and then inserted in this very dysfunctional complexity called state government. And we want to move more decision-making down to the local level. So it will be one. I mean, I think it has to be one because we could break it into 10 votes. But I think the real decision is, do people want an all-cuts budget, or do they want to extend the taxes, plus the cuts, plus the realignment? And if the Republicans can come up with a few other items, I'll be glad to consider them. But I have to use a little bit of Latin here. there's an old phrase in Latin which is ignota per ignotius. And this means to try to understand the unknown by even the more unknown. So in this case, it's let's solve this problem by creating a bunch of even greater problems. And then with all those problems on the table, we'll solve it. Well, that's not likely. So the point is, solve the problem you have, solve for the unknown that's in front of you before adding a bunch of other unknowns, which are tort reform, tax reform, civil service reform, regulatory reform, budget reform. Those are all worthy items of debate. In fact, they've been debated for the last, not 10 years, probably 20 years. So we can take a piece of it, but we can't take everything, including the kitchen sink, and throw it on the table, and before the end of this week, come up with an answer. So we got to simplify, we got to clarify, and we have to rise above our predilections and our comfort zone.
Yeah. Governor, are there pieces that you're more sympathetic to than others in these discussions?
So whatever will get it done. But
Yeah.
remember, for every push, there is a pull.
Right.
And the reason why we've had phony budgets and why we have increasing debt and we're resorting to borrow instead of pay your bills, and I'm not talking just about California, I'm talking about dozens of other states, I'm talking about Washington under both Democrats and Republicans alike, is because it's difficult and we're divided. What the Republican idea is of these 5 collateral topics is different than what Democrats believe. What Northerners believe about certain things on water may be different than what Southern Californians believe. So we've got to find that common core that unites us. And there's some people who want to divide and just pull the whole thing down. And they think, that maybe that would create some benefit for some group. I think that would be the wrong way to go. We ought to find constructive compromise and agreement. And we haven't found it up to this point, and that's why we don't have honest budgets. And they put smoke and mirrors and pretend revenues are coming when they're not. They make unallocated reductions that really can't be realized. And so each year, the deficit increases, and the public loses confidence and belief in the legislative and political process. And when the people of California, when only 16% of the people of California express trust in the legislative process, then that is ominous, because it's saying that the basic mechanism of democracy itself, which is the system of representation, is contemned, is completely disrespected, and that's dangerous. And so that's another reason why I want to go back to the electorate and get a validation, a reinvigoration of the legitimacy of our democratic government. And so this is a very important opportunity here, and I just hope that we can get those few compromises that I think are needed and can be made. But it can't be the kitchen sink. That's not realistic. And as I say, if we don't get those compromises, we don't get the vote, then the people are deprived of their vote, and we'll either get an all-cuts budget or government will be paralyzed. And they'll just sit there like they have in years past until they run out of cash. And then our credit rating goes down, the business climate is negatively affected, and nobody is better off. So that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Member Malumed, followed by Member Barreras, and Governor, if you have time, Member Baca.
I'm very.
Can I get a cup of coffee here?
I'm very excited you're here today. Thank you so much. I'm slightly giddy about it. This board is all appointed by the governor, and we're a hardworking board. We work well together. So thank you for coming to see us here. And I just wanted
Whose terms are expired?
You're the one at the end of the table.
Oh, I see. So,
Bobby Matano.
well, this is your chance to.
Yes, and tomorrow we will be going to the Capitol as part of our advocacy day. So I wanted to let you know we'll be out there advocating also for your wishes.
Good. Where are you from?
I live in Long Beach.
Okay. Where are you from? What's your name?
I'm Bobby McDonald from Orange County, and you and I were together when I was president, the student body president at LA Harbor College, when you first came on board at the LA Community College Trustees.
You don't look that old.
Neither do you.
Well, yeah, that was yeah, when I was on the community college board, there were 4 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 independent. And the leader of the Republicans said, "We have the votes and you don't, so shut up. You don't get anywhere." I said, "Well, that's not fair." He said, "Well, you don't have the votes." So in some ways, that's the way the Republicans feel. And I would like to rise above all that and show, even if you have the majority, you listen to the minority concerns, because that's really what democracy is. It's not just exercising the majority in total insensitivity to the minority party and the minority votes. You've got to find accommodation, and that's really the genius of our society, that give and take. And that's what we need now. We just need it very quickly.
Well, Governor, our board is comprised of both parties, and we'd really love to keep it that way. So when those, so when they come before you, we're very hopeful that you're going to approve them for both parties.
All right.
Member Barreras.
But then I have all these people that worked in my campaign.
Yeah.
You know, what do I
That's a
get?
quandary,
What do I get?
Yeah.
So it's a balancing. We have all these different considerations.
But you're going to rise above that.
Well, there's a famous Jesuit, Pierre de Chardin, and he said, everything that rises converges. So if we rise above our predilections and our ideology, we will converge on what's good for California. And that's a very important principle.
I just want to make a comment to let you know, I'm a local trustee down in Fresno, State Center Community College District, and we just passed a resolution to support the tax extensions, and we've asked our other colleges to also pass resolutions on behalf of the Triple CT. And one of the things that we're doing, our students are taking a very proactive approach. We are having, instead of coming on the march in March that we do here on the 14th, they're doing that in Fresno at the courthouse in support of the tax extensions, to let the community know what it means if these budget cuts do occur. So I think it's a great way, because they're going to be letting that community know that we do contribute to the economic development of our communities, and that our students really need for this tax extension to pass in order for us to continue to function at the level that we do.
And I think it's good to point out that the taxes per $100 in the budget I propose is as low as it was during Ronald Reagan's governorship. Now, a lot of these people across the street want to have a coin with Ronald Reagan's name on it. They want to have buildings. They want to have holidays. Well, this is a chance to vote for a tax structure that is as low as it was during Ronald Reagan's governorship. That's how low it is. So we're not asking for the moon. We're asking for common sense. And that's the point you want to make here. People are saying this is going to hit jobs and all that. That's just silly. There's not a decent economist that would say that. It's just the opposite. Community colleges are important. You know, the private sector is vital. And we have $2 trillion of gross domestic product. That's a lot of money. There's, 8 countries that exceed us. The other 130 are poorer than California. So we have the money. And the public domain, which certainly the community colleges are a very important part of, is a very important piece of our culture, our society, our democracy, particularly when it's about skill acquisition, it's about language, it's about becoming more capable as a citizen and as a productive member of our state. So why would people not want to pay for that? I think they do. And to deprive people of supporting the community colleges in the way that I'm asking makes no sense. And I think if the Republicans think about that, they will, I think some of them will change their mind.
Member Baca.
Governor, thank you for being here this morning. I am one of the 2 members on this board from the faculty, and I teach political science and some
Which-
initiatives.
whereabouts?
Rio Hondo College.
And what kind of
In
political
Whittier.
science do you teach?
The introductory course in international relations.
Because I've gone to the American Political Science meeting, and they have literally hundreds, maybe thousands of subcommittees on every conceivable aspect of political science.
Well, we just
That's
like
why I
to break,
wanted to ask
we like
you-
to break it apart as
What?
much as we possibly can. You know, I think for great diversity and great different views.
So you teach the introductory course.
I teach the introductory course, and one of the frustrations with initiatives is that you often have stuff on there that people can't understand, and they say, well, why are we paying those people up in Sacramento, and why don't we get them to decide these issues? But the initiative that you've put forward is pretty straightforward. I mean, this is something that the people can deal with up and down. They understand it well, and I would hope that we would get some support for putting it on the ballot. So good luck with that, and I think we're all prepared to start working as soon as we get it there.
Well, we've had such stalemate over these last years that I see this as an opportunity. In some ways, that this period in our history should be like the Federalist period, when people debated the nature of what is the American government, and what is the role of the states, what's the role of the national government, and concepts like checks and balances, like the independent judiciary. These were basic ideas that were debated and then finally ratified by the people of the 13 colonies. Well, I believe that we need a great debate in California. What is our state? What are the elements? And what is the role of community colleges? What is the role of the university and health care for the most vulnerable? That's really what's at stake here. This is not just budget. This is about the relationship between public service and private citizenship, and what is the link between those two. And there are some who would eviscerate public service in the belief that the market, in and of itself, can solve all our problems. And the opposite view is not anti-market, but it's the market with appropriate regulatory framework and a vital system of public schools and community colleges and other services that complement and strengthen our democratic and free enterprise system. So we are really dealing with some basic issues. It's not just a game of politics down the street, or just this budget item as a green eye shade exercise. This is about what we are as a people. And there are some who have a very different view than I do. But let's let the people weigh in. What is the majority view? And I believe that if we have this election, I believe they will reconfirm the basic structure of what makes California strong, and we'll be better. And then we can go on to debate in the next few years, as I fill out my term here, we'll deal with issues of regulatory reform and issues of tax reform and water and energy and the criminal justice system. These are all very important ideas, but it'd be difficult to resolve them before next Saturday or something. And that's really what we're talking about.
Member McDonald?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine. Member Izumi?
Well, Governor, I want to add to my voice to all my colleagues here on the board to thank you for taking the time to come and address us. I mean, it's a great honor. We're very privileged to have you here. I'd actually, written some glowing articles many years ago on your charter schools in Oakland, and so and complimented you on the reforms that you put in place while you were mayor there. Just wanted to ask you, picking up on the issue you talked about trust and the unfortunate lack of trust amongst the people. The community colleges are known for getting a lot of bang for the buck. And how do you, in terms of the initiative, improve that trust amongst the people for government that in order to, get a favorable outcome?
Through transparency, through an honest debate where each side is respected and the people are invited rather than scorned or ignored or shooed away. And that's really what's at stake here, inviting the people to exercise their sovereign power to decide on the future of our state. And that really is what is at stake. The magnitude of the budget deficit is so large. And by the way, this is not something that just happened because some public employees decided to spend a lot of money. I mean, the truth is this is built up over a long period of time. It has many elements. After Proposition 13, the people enjoyed a 2/3 reduction in property taxes. Well, property taxes are a huge part of government spending. When you cut that by 2/3, you then have to react. And one reaction would be cutting schools and police by an equivalent amount, by 2/3. Well, that never happened. Okay, the state, when I was governor, had a big surplus, almost $6 billion. We bailed people out, and the state bailed out and bailed out. But pretty soon the state didn't have the money. So it had to either do smoke and mirrors, had to borrow, or in some places it raised taxes. And then we went along, and then we had the vehicle license fee. And that started in the 30s, been around a long time, and then that was cut. And that became another big hit. $6-7 billion is what the state's obligation to backfill. And then we get redevelopment. Redevelopment was 2% of the property tax. 2% went into the redevelopment bank, and then they spent this money on economic development. Well, now it's 12%. 12% of local property taxes taken away from what used to go to community colleges, used to go to public schools, used to go to police or the county hospital, things like that. Well, because of all those changes, we now have to realign, and we have to rebalance the books. And so what I'm trying to do on the elimination of redevelopment is let the local property tax go back to community colleges and go back to public schools and the other places where it was historically. Where do we go with the tax extensions? We help make up for the reduction in the vehicle license fee. The $1 billion of R&D tax credit, which is a tax reduction. The other tax reductions that are given to business to stimulate the economy. Well, that only works to a point, and we have to make up for the gap, and that's what we're doing. In years past, the gap was papered over, was obscured. I'm opening the black box of the California budget and laying it out there, and we have a solution. It's balanced, and people of all backgrounds are saying this is the chance to get California in balance. And we can do that for the next 4 years, and then we can consider all the other various challenges that we have in the state, including community colleges, and I'll be here to be a part of that. I'd like to get working on it, and I'd like to get over with those regions and make sure that they treat transfer students in the way that you're getting the state colleges to do that. But we got to get this budget problem solved first.
Other board members? Okay. Governor, on behalf of all of our board, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And being so direct. We'll take you up on the UC offer for sure.
We'll do that.
and
Let's let all the people know. And do you ever study political theory? You know,
Try to.
Sheldon Wolin, do you ever read him? He was my political science teacher. But we need a theory here. This is the theory of governance itself. How does governance work? What's representation? Where do you go back to the people in an appropriate plebiscite? And we find out in Europe, when something like the common market, they go to the people. Well, when something is this wrenching in terms of the $25 billion of cuts in a $90 billion budget, I think that's the time for a plebiscite, for a referendum. What do the people want? And we can all become engaged, and you can get all your students and teachers, and we all get together, and we will reconfirm the important work you're doing. And I think that can happen.
Chancellor, do you want to?
Well, just thank you for
I
coming.
know you wanted me to come over and see you.
I did. and I'm glad you gathered an audience for us to talk together.
Well, we have to, and you can come over and just walk over.
All right. I'll take you.
Good deal.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks for the coffee.
Okay, I am going to call for a 10-minute break. I'll see everybody back in 10 minutes.